Hey guys, Dr. Shook here. Give me 1 second and I'll be right with you. How's it going today? Hope you guys are doing well. Today we're going to talk about a conceptual approach to addressing hormonal problems, because so many people, and I get it, so many people think they can open up what am I doing? No one opens up a phone book anymore. Think they can Google, right, a doctor, or look on their insurance plan and find the nearest doctor and say, you know what, I'm going to go to that doctor that does hormones, or I'm going to go to that endocrinologist. So many people, I'm not saying that you guys, because you're definitely more aware of some differences, but so many people think that they can go to a doctor and they're going to get the same exact approach or treatment for their hormonal problems that they would at any other doctor, right? Like it's a very much a everybody's the same kind of thing. Like they expect, doesn't everybody get trained the same way? You know, isn't there a similar approach? So people think that it's the same. They think that going to a doctor is they're going to get the same approach. And what I'm going to share with you guys is probably going to shock a lot of you. And that's good, because that means you're becoming aware of some differences and the reality of the situation, because that is not how it is. If you have hormonal problems, whether it be thyroid or estrogen or testosterone or progesterone issues, or whatever your hormonal problems may be, if it's if you're going to a doctor's office, there's a huge difference in how people practice and in their philosophies, okay? And so I want to share that with you guys, because there's a big difference. So really, why do doctors support these hormonal problems differently? And it comes down to training, first of all, like how were they trained, and preference, all right? So what do they prefer? What do they want to do? Why? And the reasons that they're supporting and treating people the way that they are, there are lots of different factors behind that. But I want to share with you guys some of the models that are commonly seen, and you can kind of learn and decide what you think might be best for you. And I'll share with you some of the what I think are the potential weaknesses of some of these models and the strengths of some of these models. And I'm not trying to advocate there's a right or wrong model, but I just want to share with you guys the different conceptual frameworks here of how doctors are going to support your hormonal issues differently, whether that's thyroid hormone or, like I said, your sex hormones, any of these things, cortisol. All these issues are going to be supported differently depending on the type of practitioner, their training, their preference, and their toolbox as well, right? So okay, guys, before we get into this, please help us help other people. Share this video, help your family, help your friends. Let's get the word out about this type of approach, because so many people have no clue about this, and they're really quite desperate, quite frankly, because they don't know that there are other options. So please help us help other people, and share this with your family and your friends. So, all right, let's talk about the 3 conceptual models that doctors will primarily use to try and support and improve your hormonal issues. Okay, so there are 3 different approaches. The first approach that I want to talk about is the synthetic hormone replacement model. This is considered a conventional model. This is what most doctors are going to practice right here. Most of your allopathic medical doctors are going to practice a conventional model which uses synthetic hormone replacement. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at thyroid hormone, you're looking at more of like a synthroid approach or a levothyroxine, right? Synthetic T4 replacement strategy here. And they're just going to look at it, and they're going to measure your TSH, and they're going to prescribe your medication. Now, if you're talking about sex hormones, or maybe there are menstrual cycle irregularities, they're going to look at birth control, synthetic birth controls primarily, and that's what you're going to be prescribed. This is a very simple, straightforward model, okay? Now, this model works for a lot of people, but it fails for a lot of people as well. It does not meet a lot of their needs. And many of you that are on here and that follow me and that watch me, this does not meet your needs, or you wouldn't be here. Because we're talking about alternatives to these models and really trying to, really from a different perspective. We're going to talk about it over here. The model that I primarily use is to it's a different approach, which we'll talk about in a second. But this is the synthetic conventional model. Okay, a lot of you are getting this or have gotten this, and this may or may not work for you. It helps a lot of people, but some of the weaknesses of this model is that it's not looking enough at mechanism, in my opinion. Okay, so one of the issues is that it's just looking at a few markers on labs, and then it's a prescription to support improving one or two markers, and so it's very limited in its overall assessment and consideration of other biochemistry. Or if you guys have seen, most of you have seen my thyroid physiology whiteboard video where I talk about brain to cell thyroid hormone physiology that covers production of the thyroid hormone, transportation of the thyroid hormone, sensitivity of the body or the cells to the thyroid hormone, and then I don't really cover detoxification as much, but that's all something that you've got to look at with thyroid hormone physiology. You know that this is just one piece. Typically, this conventional model is only looking at quantity, and that's it, the amount of the hormone. So it helps a lot of people, but a lot of people this is not adequate for them. I would say the majority of people, this is really not adequate, because most people, as you know, let's just use thyroid issues for example. Hypothyroidism, the majority of people are they have hypothyroidism because of Hashimoto's, right? An autoimmune thyroid condition. Just looking at thyroid hormone quantities is not it's not the answer to that. It might be a partial solution that is needed, but it doesn't address the autoimmunity, and it doesn't address a lot of the other very common breakdown points in the thyroid hormone chemistry that often occur with autoimmunity. So, okay, conventional model. Everybody got this? Model number one. Let's move into model number two. This is the bioidentical model, right? So this is where you're getting into your desiccated thyroid hormone, right? It's a bioidentical form. This is a different model. This is the natural. It's just like your hormone, so it's got to be good. It has its strengths and weaknesses, right? It definitely has some advantages and it has some disadvantages. Really, this is just looking at, instead of a conventional synthetic replacement model, this is a bioidentical model. Okay. Now within this model, and so using the thyroid as an example, where this practitioner may prescribe synthetic hormones, this one's going to prescribe more of the bioidenticals. They're going to give you Armour and Nature Thyroid and WP and compounded hormones, right? So, and if they're looking at sex hormones like estrogens or testosterone, it's going to be all bioidentical stuff, right? Versus this is going to be more of a synthetic approach. And so within this model and these bioidenticals, what they're going to do is there's going to be different philosophies on why you give them. Like this is how it works, guys. There's different philosophies. There's not a standard approach to any of this. So just you got to understand this. So first, one of the philosophies will be it's based on low labs. So they're going to look at the labs. If the labs are low, then they're going to prescribe it to bring these levels up. Okay, simple enough, right? Then there's a symptoms-only model, which completely really disregards the lab values, and they just give you more until you feel different. Okay? Really, this happens, and if you don't understand this, you may be getting this kind of care, and you may not know that. Now, you might be okay with it. You might feel amazing, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to say that there's a right or wrong approach to this, except that anytime you're taking an exogenous or an external hormone, especially, you have to be aware and actively measuring the byproducts that are produced, especially potentially dangerous estrogens. So it's some of my concerns with some of these approaches. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying you've got to be always concerned with and measuring metabolites and breakdown of especially estrogens and testosterone. These things can be very dangerous. And I've seen a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of people, and I've seen people come from these models to my office. And what ends up happening is I very rarely see them having these metabolites of estrogens and things checked that can be very dangerous. So, okay, so labs only model, labs low. If the labs are low, they prescribe a bioidentical hormone to bring up the levels. Symptoms only model, they prescribe as much as you need until your symptoms are different or better. Okay. A youthful levels model. This is kind of the anti-aging model. So this youthful levels is based on using the levels, but it's not if they're low. It's like, no, we want to get them back to your your 20 or 18-year-old levels and keep them there. And that's their philosophy. Again, I think that you got to be really careful with those types of models, and just make sure that you're assessing some of the potential side effects. So this is the conventional. Most doctors are in this model. This is the bioidentical model, which is like if we're talking about the thyroid, this is going to be synthetic model. Is going to be like levothyroxine, Synthroid, the synthetic medications. If they're talking about sex hormones, you're going to be looking at this traditional birth control and synthetic replacements. The bioidentical model is going to be things like, if we're considering the thyroid, the desiccated thyroid hormone, using the T3, T4 combination, right? That's what the desiccated thyroid hormone is. There are the other things, estrogens and testosterone would be bioidentical forms, right? It's just a bioidentical form. And then there's different philosophies within that model. There's the low labs. We're going to bring them up to what they think is normal. And here's the crazy thing about this. You guys, I don't expect you to know this, but the lab ranges, there's no consensus. I mean, there's some labs you get back with hormone levels, and guess what? There's no upper limit on the lab. There's a lower limit, but there's no upper limit because there's not a consensus on it. There's not a consensus. There's no agreement. So, so take it for what it is. So based on low labs, symptoms only model, we're going to give you more until you feel better. We're going to keep raising those doses. And then there's a youthful levels model where they do look at levels and they try to get them back to like when you were 18. And there are positives and negatives. Now there's a third model. This is the model that I practice, and this is considered a functional model, which is really looking at trying to understand the physiology in more depth, and trying to look at where the person's chemistry is breaking down, right? So in this model, you're looking at tools and utilizing tools that support the body's natural production, okay? That you're trying to optimize what the body's doing on its own, when it's not necessarily a hormone-based model, okay? Now, we do use some intermediate hormones, but like, for example, with adrenal glands, we might use DHEA or something like that. But really, we're looking for, we're assessing, we're casting a wide net, we're looking at the physiology of the person, their body chemistry. We're looking at where it's breaking down. We're trying to identify what is disrupting normal hormone production by the body, right? So we're trying to work with the body as much as possible. So we're looking at things like, do they have normal production of the hormone? If not, where is that production breaking down? If it's breaking down with brain signaling of a gland, so let's use the thyroid for example. So if it's the brain signals the thyroid to produce more thyroid hormone. If we can measure and we can look at different hormones. So we can look at the pituitary hormone, which is the pituitary gland is in the brain and it signals the thyroid to make more thyroid hormone. We can look at the TSH level. We can also look at the T4, the T3, and the thyroid levels to assess and get a better idea of whether or not that feedback system is working properly. Is the pituitary gland not signaling the thyroid? If so, then there's suppression there. And we want to look at what are the other biochemical problems that can occur that may cause pituitary gland suppression. We're looking at function and we're trying to optimize function. So when you see that, you would consider things like inflammatory issues. So is there a high inflammatory load? Is there a problem with elevated cortisol that's suppressing the pituitary gland's output? Right? So you've got to look at, we're trying to understand the chemistry. We're trying to be a better physiologist and figure out where the breakdown is occurring so that we can then support with diet and nutritional supplementation to try and enhance or reestablish some of those endocrine feedback loops. We call them feedback loops. When one hormone goes up, another one goes down because the brain's always monitoring the levels in the blood. So we're looking at breakdown. We're looking at breakdown in production. We're looking at breakdowns in transportation. So most of these hormones, all of these hormones that we're talking about actually get carried from the gland where they're made. So let's use the thyroid as an example. But where all these hormones, they get carried through the blood on a little protein. It's a binding protein. Okay, so it binds to your thyroid hormone, for example. We call it thyroid binding globulin. And it's in the blood, and it binds to the thyroid hormone, because let's say the thyroid hormone's made here. Well, how does it get to your toe? Okay? Well, it doesn't float freely. It actually binds to a protein, and it's carried to the toe, where then it gets to a point where the body needs it, and it disassociates, or it breaks free from that little protein, and it's used by the cells of the toe. Okay? Because every cell in the body needs thyroid hormone. So how does it get there? Well, that's transportation. So is the transportation breaking down? Is there a problem affecting transport? Are those binding proteins too many or too little? Right? Is there another issue that's occurring there? Then we would look at things like conversion. So let's use the thyroid hormone as an example. Thyroid hormone is primarily, guys tell me, what is the primary hormone made by your thyroid gland? The primary thyroid hormone. Okay, so I'm gonna give you one of two choices. Is it T4 or is it T3? What's the primary thyroid hormone made by the gland? It's T4. T4. So we would look at like total T4. That's the best representation of the thyroid's ability to produce the hormone. Okay, we look at total T4, and then we would see, well, what's their total T3 level, and we would see, relatively speaking, does it appear that the T4 is converting appropriately into T3? Because guess where that occurs? Mainly it occurs in the liver. The liver converts a lot of your T4 to T3. About 93% of the hormone made by your thyroid is T4. About 7% is T3. So you've got this huge amount, this 93% of T4 that has to be converted in the liver to T3. So we would look at conversion. We would look at transportation. We would look at sensitivity. Okay, so functional model. I'm still going on the functional model here. We would look at sensitivity. So are the receptors, so every cell in the body uses thyroid hormone. So every cell in the body, imagine a balloon, guys, and the outside of that balloon, the rubber outside of the balloon, has little receptors, which are kind of like little docking stations that your hormones could attach to, that stimulate a change in the cell's physiology. So we would look to see, is the cell able to have normal sensitivity to the hormone in circulation? Because maybe the hormone's there, maybe the quantities are perfectly normal, but the cell's not as sensitive to it as it needs to be because of things like inflammation. Maybe there's a fatty acid imbalance where because your cells, guys, the outside of the cell is a we call it a lipid bilayer. So it's a fat double layer that makes the cell wall. And there are all these receptors there. So if you don't have good fatty acid status, if you're predominant omega-6 fats versus omega-3s, and you don't have good ratios, you can have a lot of problems with sensitivity. If you're still eating trans fats in today's world, then you've got to stop it. But trans fats also can integrate themselves into the cell membrane and create problems with sensitivity. Do you have high levels of inflammation that are decreasing the sensitivity? Inflammation and inflammatory load will definitely create problems with sensitivity of your cells to your thyroid hormones. So we're looking at all of this function, right? We're looking at all of this function, and then we're also looking at at biotransformation or clearance of a lot of these hormones, and especially when you're talking about sex hormones and you're looking at estrogens and their metabolism, and whether or not your body's clearing them appropriately is critical, because we know that a lot of the estrogen metabolites, which a metabolite is a breakdown, is basically a product of metabolism, of breakdown of estrogens. And if there certain levels of these estrogens can create major problems and predispose you to cancer and other issues that we really want to be concerned with, especially if we're supplementing with hormones. Even if we're using some of the hormones that are more natural, we want to be aware that we've got to that we can have an impact and an increase in some of these more dangerous metabolites. So we want to look at metabolism and clearance of these hormones. And that's more of the functional model. So what's the right model? Well, I'm going to tell you there's no right or wrong model, because all of these models help people. But I think that there's greater risk with certain models than others. For sure, these are going to be simpler models where you just take something, right? And you just take something and you see if it helps you. But I am very, very cautious, and I think most people, they want to feel better as fast as possible. So this is very appealing. These models are very appealing. But at the same time, they also don't want to have, they want their body to be healthy naturally. They don't want to not necessarily take pills all the time. And they really want to get to the root driver and cause of the problem. And I think that, the functional model, the functional endocrinology model is one that looks at this, the interaction and the, all the things I just talked about are really related to the crosstalk and the influence of one system on another. So for example, I was talking about the sensitivity of your body to your hormones in circulation. And I was talking about inflammation. Well, that's a way inflammation is a product of the immune system. So you're really looking at how the immune system could impact and affect hormone sensitivity, which is not really considered at all in these models, at least in their purest forms. Now, if someone is blending these, then maybe it is being considered more. But it is, it's definitely, it's important to understand that if you're being treated by a doctor and you're under one of these models, that you understand the philosophy and the goal, because it's not as simple as just going down the road and pulling into someone's parking lot and thinking that you're going to go and get the same kind of care in one office that you would another, because it's vastly different, vastly different. So I wanted to share this with you guys because I thought that this would be really educational and helpful and give you some perspective on what you might want to consider, and you might want to think about as you're looking at how your doctor's supporting you. So if you're getting more of the synthetic hormones, the Synthroid or levothyroxine, or the traditional like birth control, you're probably in this conventional model, which is what most medical allopathic physicians are practicing. And it's not that it's right or wrong; these all have a tremendous value. But this is probably what you're getting here. Now, if you're getting like a desiccated thyroid hormone, you're probably in the bioidentical model, and you're going to be probably in one of these 3 subcategories. So they're going to give you the hormones based on low labs and try to bring them up to what they think is normal. You're going to get it based on symptoms. They're just going to give it to you and see when you feel better or if you feel better. And then they're not really going to pay attention to the labs. And then the youthful levels is more of the anti-aging model as a concept anyway. And they bring it up to levels, let's say you're 60, but they're going to try to raise these levels to your youthful levels at 18 or 20 or whatever their goal is. And this is all depending on what the doctor's training is and preference. And there's no right or wrong. And then there's the functional endocrinology model that is really looking at production, transportation, sensitivity, and then detoxification or elimination of hormones. So this is really looking at a more physiological basis to try and optimize what your body's currently doing. And so I want to share this with you. I hope this has been helpful and informative, but it's a really important thing that you guys understand that there's a lot of different ways that you can be these problems can be approached. And this is my model, functional endocrinology, and it's one that I think is beneficial. But all these have value. They all have value, and I think that there's something that we can all learn from one another by assessing and looking at how we support people. So I want to share this with you. I hope this has been helpful, guys. If this has helped you, please help us help other people and share these videos, and post comments, your questions and comments here, and we will try to get to them as soon as we can. We are always gracious and grateful for you, and I apologize if we can't get back to you guys a lot of times. But we just get so many requests and questions and messages that we really need a team of like 12 people. We need a team of like 12 people just to answer social media questions. So I'm trying my best to help you guys out and give you support. But please do, if you have questions here, post them, and I'll try to take a look at them a little bit later and give you my thoughts. But hopefully this has been helpful. Appreciate you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. I'll try to join you again tomorrow with some more information. But if you guys have any questions, please let us know, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.